Summer of dry thunderstorms. London is undoubtedly asleep. The entire world slumbers. A universal realm of sleep. Holmes meticulously aligned the Times with the stack of today's other newspapers. None of this boded well with me. The neat handling of the newspapers presaged the great spleen with all its attendant attributes: irritability, revolver practice indoors, and late-night music-making under the influence of cocaine. Holmes, you have no mercy on the poor, ordinary folk. May they not live, if only for a brief space, without sensational murders, robberies, burglaries, and disappearances? They can, my dear Watson, of course they can. I cannot. And I am no less a Londoner than the rest. He suddenly fell silent, reached for the poker, and began aimlessly twirling it in his hands. I had nothing to say. An absence of high-profile cases meant an absence of clients, as no client meant no fee. My readers, I fear, have derived a mistaken impression regarding the motives of Holmes's endeavors. A certain bored gentleman in pursuit of sharp sensations. The blame lies partly with me, and partly with social convention. Well-bred people do not discuss monetary matters in public, and it ill becomes a gentleman to earn his living through criminal investigation. An amateur detective, that is how Holmes is characterized both by the crime columns and literary critics. And characterized incorrectly. Holmes is a professional to his very marrow. Not a single crime of consequence, whether committed in the kingdom or on the continent, escaped his notice. The latest treatises on criminology were studied by him from cover to cover, attentively, minutely, critically. Finally, the most intricate, perplexing cases solved by him. Is that not proof of supreme professionalism? Yet Holmes was a professional in another, everyday sense as well. He earned his living by investigating crimes. And, I record with bitterness, he never amassed a fortune. He did not even own his own house, remaining a lodger at Mrs. Hudson's. Inexpensive lodgings for a gentleman of our youth. A considerable portion of visitors came to Baker Street in the full conviction that not only would no fee be required, but that Mr. Sherlock Holmes would absorb all expenses incurred in pursuing the case. On occasion, that was indeed how it transpired. If the case proved particularly mysterious, intriguing, challenging the brilliant mind of my friend. But more often than not, when faced with the necessity of remunerating Holmes's services, the visitor would hesitate, say he would think it over, and vanish forever. When work was plentiful, Holmes was a model of energetic, cheerful, active humanity. But no sooner did a lull set in than his mood underwent a radical transformation. He dreaded becoming useless. That brought hardship and poverty in its train. And with the passing years, this anxiety grew. The feeling is familiar to me as well. Why deny it? A successful physician I failed to become. People read my stories with pleasure, I trust, but prefer to be treated by other doctors, those who do not allow themselves to be distracted by outside matters. The practice I bought was squandered in an instant. For what sort of doctor is constantly deserting his patients to take part in the investigation of ghastly crimes? Finding me absent time after time, they swiftly defected to my colleagues. Yet I could do nothing. Literature demanded more and more time, and I found the literary fees sweeter than the medical ones. My participation in Holmes's investigations was not owed solely to the friendship that bound us. Genuine cases served as the foundation of my stories, feeding my fantasy and imagination with facts. In turn, thanks to these stories, Sherlock Holmes's fame spread far beyond the borders of the kingdom, providing a more or less steady stream of clients. But at times, alas, there came days of doldrums, as now. 10 days, and not a single case worth mentioning. "A visitor for you, Mr. Holmes?" Mary looked into the sitting room, Mrs. Hudson's niece, who helped her with the housekeeping, for age was taking its toll. "Very well." Holmes displayed no particular joy. "A case concerning a lost beloved cat." "Really, Holmes," I chided him. "Good day." Before us stood a fresh-faced young man, middle class, 12 to the dozen of his kind in our parish. A sportsman, perhaps. I attempted Holmes's method on our visitor. Allow me myself. The young man looked tensely back and forth between Holmes and me. Holmes remained silent. So did I. You are Mr. Sherlock Holmes? The newcomer finally decided, taking a step toward Holmes and shaking his hand vigorously. And you are Dr. Watson? Quite so. Now what brings to two English detectives? Oh, Holmes. He knew that I prided myself on the title of detective, even more than that of literary man, and never missed an opportunity to flatter me. To two detectives, a perceptive student of chemistry, presumably fulfilling an errand for relatives, received a telegram from Russia? How do you do it? The student looked more astonished than bewildered. I have read a great deal about you, of course, but this is beyond comprehension. Merely the ability to observe and deduce. Holmes flushed slightly with pleasure. Russia, you have a distinctly Slavic countenance, and then your pronunciation, altogether too flawless, too academic. Finally, your shoelaces are not tucked into your shoes. Student, your necktie and age. Chemist, reagent stains on your hands, of which I had quite a few myself in my day. And relatives? The telegram? You do not convey the impression of a man who has met with a misfortune, which signifies that you are carrying out someone else's commission. You are no lawyer, hence the commission is most likely from relatives. Urgent commissions are usually transmitted by telegraph, and the cut on your index finger indicates that you recently opened a dispatch. For some time now they have been sealed, quite ineptly, with adhesive tape bearing edges sharp as a razor. A Scottish invention. By the way, I recommend using a knife in future. The cut is trivial, of course, but were the edges of the tape smeared with a culture of Asiatic fever bacilli? Indeed. The student examined his finger, then hastily lowered his hand. Allow me to introduce myself. Fadeev, Konstantin Fadeev. And what brings you here? You are entirely correct, a telegram, and he produced a sheet of paper from his pocket. I received it today from my uncle. That is to say, he is not my uncle, but my godfather, yet, in any case, that matters little. May I read it out? Be so good. Holmes leaned back in his armchair and closed his eyes. The old war-horse smelled battle. Constantine, endeavor to persuade Mr. Sherlock Holmes to come to our summer castle upon a matter of paramount importance. Matter extremely urgent. Brown authorized to cover expenses. Signed, P. Brown is the representative of my uncle's firm in London, confectionery and sugar. And your uncle himself? Oh, uncle, he is Prince Peter Alexandrovich of Oldenburg. A prince? A genuine one, and the great-great-grandson of Emperor Paul. Exalted spheres. To be sure, his wife, Princess Olga, is a Grand Duchess. The Russian paused. Sister to the reigning Emperor Nicholas II. It happens. Holmes was not inclined to marvel or express any other emotion. A prince is a prince. What precisely prompted the application to me, I presume you do not know? Not in the least. Nothing. The telegram is all I possess apart from the check. It is yours if you agree to go. Naturally, travel and other expenses will be paid separately. Holmes, having glanced at the check, placed it upon the side table. I cast my eyes sideways. The sum was not astronomical, but more than satisfactory. Consequently, the prince expects me to travel to Russia without the vaguest notion as to the nature of the business. So it appears. You and Dr. Watson. There is not a word about me in the telegram. It struck me that the lad knew more than he admitted. In this one, no. But my uncle's attorney, Mr. Brown, received instructions to defray the expenses of 2 persons. Your uncle is prudent. What else was there to say? Where are you staying? We shall give our answer tomorrow. Holmes returned the check to the visitor. Very well. Here is my address. We could depart tomorrow evening, provided, of course, you accept the proposal. Are you traveling to Russia as well? Yes, the vacations. Besides, you will require an interpreter, will you not? I shall act as that interpreter." Konstantin Fadyev took his leave. I fear Russia remains a blank spot in my index files. High time to fill it in, Holmes. I could see my friend vacillating. Watson. 10 years ago, I should have set out without a second thought. He picked up the poker he had laid aside during the interview with the client. I am like this poker, still fit for service, but far from new. Remember when Dr. Roylott damaged it for us? I straightened it rather carelessly then, whereas now... He exerted himself, and the barely perceptible curve vanished. You see, Holmes? Trifles. But it was plain Holmes was pleased. So we are off, Holmes? Watson, I hardly dared ask you. Russia is rather far. It is not Liverpool. Trifles. I echoed Holmes's phrase back to him. If you go, I go. Then pack your trunk, Watson. We travel where we are needed. The spleen had vanished. Holmes was once more charged with vigor, the finest form of energy. He was needed. He had been summoned to help. I rejoiced alongside my friend. Good heavens! Had he been invited to the South Pole to search for the lost Scot, I should have had to buy a fur coat. I shall not describe the journey in detail. The trains of the 20th century have exchanged romance for comfort. With the precision of good clocks, cities and countries flashed past and receded into the past, into yesterday. Holmes, faithful to his rule never to put the cart before the horse, framed no hypotheses in the absence of facts, but rested, slept, ate with appetite, slept again, and when awake refused newspapers, preferring to hone his deductive powers upon strangers strolling along the station platforms. I was bored. The newspapers were all identical, brought along by us, while the continental ones, especially after France had receded behind us, or rather we behind France, could be read only by a polyglot. So I wrote a little, and spent the remainder of the time trying to imitate Holmes. Our Virgil, Konstantin Fadyev, spoke of our employer. We were indeed heading for the very flower of the Russian aristocracy. Well then, Uncle, Prince Peter of Oldenburg, diligently managed sugar beet farming and sugar refining on the estate of his mother, Eugenia Maximilianovna, Grand Duchess, niece of Alexander I, princess by marriage. Her husband, our client's father, Prince Alexander of Oldenburg, a patron and devotee of science, was known in scholarly circles as an archaeologist, chemist, and optical physicist. Uncle's wife, Princess Olga, was sister to the reigning emperor, Nicholas II. The estate of Ramon comprised 7,000 desyatans of arable land, some 15,000 acres, forest, a castle, a sugar refinery, and a confectionery factory. The elder Oldenburgs resided in the castle. The younger Oldenburgs lived nearby on the estate of Olgino. Naturally, beyond Ramon, the family owned vast domains, palaces, and much, much else in every corner of immense Russia. Upon Holmes, this enumeration of titles, lands, and riches produced no impression whatsoever. Prior to departure, he had thoroughly examined the Almanach de Gotha. Constantine then shifted his attention to me. Several times he timidly hinted that he felt an irresistible urge toward authorship, was trying his hand at literature, and asked if I might offer some advice to a novice writer. I dislike giving advice, even medical, and excused myself by saying that Russian literature was inaccessible to me as a foreigner. Let Constantine turn to his own great countrymen. The great ones are dead, sighed the student, but troubled me no further. On the fourth day, we reached our destination, or nearly so. At a small station, we left the express. 10 miles to the estate, Constantine looked about. 2 men were hurrying toward us. These are for us. The reception party collected our luggage. How are we to travel? After the long journey, everything around me seemed on the verge of breaking loose and flying away. The little station building, the trees, a dubious structure smelling of Lysol. Holmes supported me by the elbow. Dizzy? Thank you, Holmes. It is passing. We followed Constantine. I hope we do not have to walk 10 miles. Far from it. We have already arrived. He led us to a small train consisting of a miniature locomotive and a carriage. Uncle built a branch line to Ramon. The carriage proved to be a luxurious saloon car, specially reserved for greeting honored guests, Constantine explained. He alone would not have been met in such fashion. How will they see us off, I wonder? Laughed Holmes. The forest pressed right up to the tracks. A little more, and the branches would begin rattling against the carriage windows. A servant entered the saloon. He asks if the gentlemen require anything, translated Constantine. In what sense, require anything? I inquired.
Tea, vodka, refreshments. But the estate is close by, surely. Quite so, sir. We shall do without, I think. The forest receded, light flooded in. Another 15 minutes. Constantine glanced out the window. There came a whiff of smoke and burning. Why, a fire, surely. I too looked outside. Nearby, the undergrowth was blazing, grass and shrubs, while several peasants attempted to beat back the flames with leafy branches. Constantine spoke with the servant. Drought. No rain since St. Moki's day. Since Moki's day? Our Orthodox saint. In other words, since mid-May. If rain doesn't strike soon, the sugar beets are ruined. Dry thunderstorms are scorching the earth, as the peasants say. The fire appeared small. I hazarded a guess that they would manage it. They'll put it out, sir. It's not the first time. Constantine proved by his translation that literature was not going to let go of him so easily. The train slowed down. Here we are.
A carriage stood opposite the train car. We did not even have to touch our luggage. The servants handled everything. Where are the factory and the castle? I sat beside Holmes, with Constantine opposite. On the right bank of the river. A narrow-gauge railway runs there, carrying coal, sulfur, lime, and beets in, and sugar and candies out. The coachman flicked the reins and we set off. Between the trees, the river gleamed blue. That is our river, the Voronej. Problems with the bridge. A stone one must be built to carry heavy trains. The bridge was indeed rudimentary. Wooden, built on piles, painted dark green, it resembled a moss-grown dragon feigning sleep in hopes of an absent-minded traveler taking it for a real, respectable bridge. And beyond, further and higher, stood the castle of childhood dreams, complete with whimsical crenellated turrets, lancet windows, and all the other knickknacks of King Arthur's era. The Oldenburg Castle, announced Constantine with affected indifference, without even turning his face toward it. As if to say, we have more of these castles than we know what to do with. We managed to cross the unawakened bridge. The trees on the right bank closed in swiftly, blotting out good old England. In place of the vision came an aroma, also from childhood, the scent of sweets, Christmas gifts, and happiness. The confectionery factory. See it there between the white willows? 3 stories high. And further on, the sugar refinery. The refinery starts operating in autumn, but the factory knows no rest the whole year round. It holds gold medals from the Paris and London exhibitions. Holmes and I exchanged smiling glances. There was such concealed pride in that offhand remark. At the fork, the carriage turned left, uphill. To the right lay the factory and the sweets. Alas, that was not our destination. The horses broke from a trot into a walk. The coachman shouted at them for appearance's sake. Flicks of the whip were given lightly, but the incline was steep, and the horses were wise. The road wound upward in a serpentine curve around the castle, and when we finally reached level ground, we still had to drive along a cool, shaded avenue bounded by a stone wall. The wide open gates were guarded by turrets, one shorter, the other tall with a chiming clock that had just finished ringing a little tune before striking 3 times. Local time. The carriage entered the courtyard. A fountain in front of the castle hissed merrily with jets of water. while the castle itself, viewed close at hand, gained volume, weight, and substance, no longer seeming unreal or fairy tale-like. We were lodged not in the palace proper but nearby, in a large wing called the Cozy. And indeed, our dwelling was quite charming, moreover, luxurious, but with a luxury that was quiet, solid, and subdued, if such luxury is possible at all. Oak paneling, carpets, mahogany. Small wonder, Constantine explained. The house was built and furnished for the newlyweds, but Princess Olga had bought an estate nearby and erected a residence after her own taste, simpler but more spacious. The Cozy remained for honored guests, Grand Duke Michael, for instance, or Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So much the better for us. Constantine himself was quartered in a third building, also close at hand, 40 paces from our wing, in the suite apartments. No matter, very pleasant indeed. Suite apartments meant quarters for persons accompanying exalted guests, for the retinue. "Call me what you will, so long as you do not put me in the oven," Constantine quoted a Russian proverb. The majordomo conveyed that Prince Peter expected us in 3 hours' time, desiring that we first rest and accustom ourselves after the journey. Dinner at 7 in the evening, on account of summer, informal dress. "Country season, rural relaxation," Constantine commented. "In St. Petersburg, heaven forbid. Strict formality, but here, among the meadowlands and oak groves, things are simpler. Prince Peter will even shake hands with a peasant in the field. Not with just anyone, naturally, but with an industrious, well-to-do fellow." Washing away the dust of travel in the bath, I pondered the nature of the business for which we had been invited here. Invited Holmes, to be precise. The powerful of this world do not often resort to his services, but resort they do. What would it be this time? I was deliberating over what to wear when there came a knock at the door. "Watson, you are in indecision." Holmes stood there in a light linen suit. "Yes, Holmes. A dinner jacket?" No, by no means." Firstly, you heard, informal. Secondly, by donning a dinner jacket or evening tails, you claim, at least outwardly, to stand upon the same step as your host, whereas in plain attire, you afford him the opportunity to condescend to you. And thirdly, in Russia, extravagance is expected of foreigners. It lends greater weight. Had you a golf suit? I have no golf suit. Then wear that checkered one. I still hesitated, but decided to trust Holmes. After all, he had been received at Windsor. "That is not the point," laughed Holmes, as though reading my thoughts. "When you summon a plumber, you do not expect him to arrive in dress clothes. It suffices if his attire is neat. Well then, we are those self-same plumbers." The argument struck me dumb, and I hastened to change according to my friend's recommendation, and just in time, Constantine was on the threshold. "Gentlemen, are you ready?" The student was attired in a white tailcoat suit. Well. The setting sun beat full upon the facade of the castle. The fountain jets resembled sparkling pink wine, and the castle itself glowed like fire. "How old is the castle?" I asked the student. "Oh, very old. 25 years, I believe." 25? "Yes." A fine spray of water reached us at the steps of the main entrance. For a moment it turned chilly. Holmes shivered, but the hot continental summer hastened to return. "Artesian water," Constantine informed us. "The water tower is hidden by trees, but it matches the castle. Handsome. And tall. On the far side of the palace is a cascade. The water flows down to the sugar refinery and factory. Not wasted." A footman, liveried and wearing a powdered wig, conducted us into the castle toward Prince Peter. Constantine remained by the fountain to while away the time until dinner. A few passages through somewhat gloomy corridors, and we found ourselves in His Highness's study. The prince received us cordially. "Pray make yourselves comfortable." He indicated the armchairs. We sat down while His Highness paced across a carpet that was large but considerably worn. "I thank you, gentlemen, for responding to my plea and coming. The matter that forced me to seek your aid may at first glance appear trivial and petty, but believe me, to myself and my entire family it is of supreme importance. A cigar? Prince Peter suddenly remembered. I prefer a pipe. Holmes reached into his pocket. I took a cigar, though why I know not. Of late I had turned away from smoking, and cigars I rarely sampled. Once before, if memory served me. Perhaps the atmosphere was responsible. Princes, castles, Russia. Here in this study stands our working safe. A week ago I noticed that my wife's jewels had disappeared from it. A diamond ring and a pair of rubies. The loss is disagreeable in itself, but particularly so owing to certain circumstances connected with the stones. What circumstances? Holmes was enjoying his pipe, while I, without the slightest pleasure, blew smoke toward the ceiling, which was also unusual, paneled in wood burnt with dozens of miniature scenes. A veritable Scheherazade, 1001 Nights. The stones were my wife's dowry and are exceedingly rare. The diamond is 16 carats, while the rubies are quite unique. They glow in the dark. According to tradition, they are ancient stones from the treasury of the Egyptian pharaohs, and their loss is bitterly regrettable. Were only these jewels kept in the safe? Yes. Strictly speaking, my wife keeps her jewelry at our estate in Olgino, but I brought these stones here to examine them for radioactivity. I suspect the luminescence is due to a radium impurity in the rubies, and wish to repeat Dr. Becquerel's experiment, placing them on a photographic plate wrapped in black light-proof paper. So I brought them, and the following day, when I intended to perform the experiment, they had vanished. And why did you decide to perform the experiment here rather than at your own estate? I wished to make use of my father's laboratory. Besides, he was curious to conduct certain optical experiments with the stones himself. In fact, the radium idea was his. Consequently, that the jewels were here in the safe was known to you and your father, Prince Alexander. Anyone else? My wife. I took the jewels with her consent, naturally. Allow me to inspect the safe. The prince led Holmes to the wall. Ah, a Maya safe, a solid box. Holmes examined the door. How many keys exist for this safe? One. Were it lost, we should have to apply to the manufacturers. Where is it kept? Here, in the writing desk. The prince opened a drawer. Here it is. Does it not seem pointlessly futile to install an excellent safe, yet keep the key where even a child could find it? Nothing of value is normally kept in the safe. The key lies in a secret compartment. Besides, in our absence, the study is always locked. Locked? But surely it is cleaned at times. Yes, naturally. But there has never been a theft in this house. Allow me the key. Holmes stepped to the window and examined the bit under a magnifying glass. Intricate workmanship. Open the safe, if you please. He returned the key to the prince. The door, thick and fireproof, swung open silently. In the depths, papers, envelopes, and folders were visible. Where were the jewels placed? In an inner combination compartment. Indeed, in the upper right-hand corner stood another small box, a safe within a safe, fitted with 4 dials. The stones were kept inside it? Yes. As you see, there was no cause to fear anything. Holmes examined the dials. A letter combination, over 200,000 variations. Who knows the word? Myself and my father. Is the word recorded anywhere? No. We hold it in memory. It is simple. 0. Are the papers valuable? Not to thieves. Family documents, letters, old manuscripts. Nothing else missing? Except the jewels, nothing. Are they insured? The jewels? The rubies? No. Holmes studied the safe attentively for several minutes. You see, Mr. Holmes. The prince laid his cigar in the ashtray, not half smoked. He was nervous. The years spent beside Holmes had not been wasted. I noticed both the restless twitching of his fingers and the paleness of his face. His pulse was probably near 80.
The chief unpleasantness lies in the fact that the stones, the rubies, have been requested on loan by Alexandra Fyodorovna. Forgive me, who? It is I who should apologize. Snobbery, referring casually to Her Imperial Majesty, but she is my brother-in-law's wife. Furthermore, uttering titles is a sure way to attract outside attention. We endeavor to avoid it.
Why should the Empress require your wife's stones?
You see, at present the court is enamored of occult sciences, spiritualism, mesmerism, whatnot.
And the rubies are allegedly mentioned in the Book of the Dead, an ancient Egyptian papyrus. It is possible they are indeed those very stones. The Empress required them for spiritualist seances. Olga agreed to grant the request, naturally. That is why I hurried with the experiments, for who knew how long Alexandra Fyodorovna might require the rubies. And now they are gone. Most awkward, most embarrassing. When did you receive the Empress's request? A letter from her was delivered by Colonel Haushofer, a man close to certain circles at court. The colonel was to convey the stones. Haushofer? I have heard that name somewhere. He is a colonel in the German army, currently on extended leave, known for his travels in the Himalayas. Yes, I remember. The expedition of 08 and 11. Holmes closed the safe door. When did the colonel arrive at the estate? A week ago. And the stones vanished. The following day. Is the colonel aware of the loss? No.
No one is aware, save my father and myself. I count heavily upon your assistance. I shall exert every effort. Only, the matter is delicate in the extreme, you understand? I shall exert every effort, repeated Holmes. By the way, why did you choose to turn specifically to me? Mr. Holmes, even here, far from England, you are known as the paramount expert in your field. Dr. Mortimer spoke at length of your genius. You are acquainted with Dr. Mortimer? Yes. A year ago, my father invited Dr. Mortimer to excavations of early human burials, Neolithic, I believe. Father is a passionate devotee of science, and when it transpired that primitive men lived in the chalk caves of our river thousands of years ago, he invited Dr. Mortimer, whom he has long known through publications. True, Holmes, I confirmed. I recall receiving a letter from Mortimer. Thanks to Sir Henry's support, he relinquished medical practice to devote himself entirely to his beloved science.
Curious, muttered Holmes. I must speak with Prince Alexander, and perhaps with other residents of the castle. By all means, the prince glanced at his clock, a floor-standing Anheim. Dinner will be served presently, and you will meet the entire family and Colonel Haushofer. Dinner, no doubt owing to the summer season, took place upon the terrace, commanding a view of the river, the station, the forest, and unknown distances beyond. Everything passed pleasantly enough. We were presented to their highnesses, Her Imperial Highness Princess Eugenia, Her Imperial Highness Princess Olga, Prince Alexander of Oldenburg, without titles. Here in Ramon we keep things simple. A young girl named Liza, Prince Alexander's ward, and Colonel Haushofer. With Constantine we were already acquainted. An animated conversation ensued concerning the Lancaster system of mutual instruction, the relative merits of German and French methods of extracting sugar from beets, polyphonic motets, a compliment to Holmes, I fancied, and much else besides. The dialogue was conducted in very respectable English, so Constantine was spared any exertion. Indeed, he neglected his duties altogether, carrying on a private conversation with the 17-year-old ward. The rest viewed the couple benevolently. I continued to hone my art of observation and deduction. To tell the truth, I was somewhat disappointed at finding no Arabian Nights luxury, no golden plate, mountains of caviar, dancing slave girls, pacing peacocks, or bears on spits. We had to content ourselves with Meissen porcelain, Cossack-style sterlet. It was Wednesday, Constantine explained, though what Wednesday had to do with it escaped me, and sparkling dawn wines. Somewhere nearby, screeching noises could be heard, which the student assured us were peacocks. Time passed smoothly. Everyone appeared to be enjoying themselves, even Holmes, who was animatedly explaining to the princesses the finer points of Celtic song rendition. Attempts were made to draw me into the conversation. I perspired, answered out of turn, choked on the wine, which was excellent, it must be confessed. When the ladies departed, matters grew easier. Serious port took the place of sparkling wine. Holmes lit his pipe. I detected in him no signs of deep abstraction. It seemed my friend was simply resting, enjoying the evening. Yet at times I caught faint indications of dissatisfaction, barely perceptible even to me, who had spent many, and the best, years at Holmes's side. I should have compared Holmes's mood to that of a surgeon hastily summoned to an august personage to remove a wart. The water of the cascade gurgled as it rushed downward. Mellowed and soothed by the wine, I followed the whimsical conversation. Materialism, idealism, mere words and labels. Science differs from superstition primarily in terminology. The elder prince led the main theme, the others chiming in, not without grace. Take medical discoveries. Materialists, if I mistake not, formerly explained the nature of cholera as noxious vapors, miasmas. Is that not so, Dr. Watson? Quite so. Sorcerers and medicine men, on the other hand, held that demons were responsible. Now, following Professor Koch's discoveries, science has established that the cause of cholera is a microbe, a creature invisible to the eye, inhabiting man and bringing him to disease. How does a microbe differ in that case from a demon? And where are the miasmas?
But, Your Highness, the colonel did not forget to give the prince his title, perhaps because addressing him by name and patronymic, as is customary among Russians, proved far more difficult. You will not deny that science constitutes a mighty force. Precisely, Herr Oberst. Yet among our people there is a proverb, where there is force, mind is unneeded. Men of science increasingly employ their hands rather than their heads. Science drives a battering ram where one ought to find a key, insert it into the lock, and turn it. Find it. There's the rub. Keys do not lie lying about underfoot, nor should they, Herr Oberst, for men would trample them into the mire, or worse still, open the door. Why worse? A door admits in both directions. I sat listening to the famous Russian discourse. The sun had set, lamps were brought, to whose light moths flew, flying and circling, unable to overcome the glass that barred them from the flame. Fortunately, or unfortunately, this door is hidden and fleeting. It appears and vanishes for long periods, for a lifetime, rendering the key a trinket, a nothing, until the next time, in another age, to another generation. The long journey, the unfamiliar setting, new faces, the wine, all combined to produce in me a singular state of beatitude and serene repose. I sipped port, growing gradually tipsy, yet feeling not the slightest concern. Such pleasant people, such a calm, assured Holmes. And the case itself, though intriguing to my experienced eye, seems neither terrible nor bloody. A pleasant case, a pleasant place, pleasant people. Ah, what a chatterbox I have become. Prince Alexander interrupted himself. The hour is late, and you are fresh from your journey. Good night. Good night to all. And tomorrow, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I am certain all difficulties will be resolved. Holmes bowed politely. Everyone rose. Why, it is barely past 7, I protested. In London, Watson, in London. Holmes took me by the elbow and firmly steered me along the path surrounding the castle. A bright full moon shone better than a dozen lanterns. I am perfectly sober, Holmes. I do not doubt it. No, but I really am sober. Whereas you, Holmes, drank almost nothing. Neither you nor the rest. I now realized that all glasses save mine had merely been sipped. I pay tribute to your powers of observation, Watson. Then why did we leave? Because our host bade us good night. Ah, yes. The plumbers, right? We had reached our quarters before Holmes finally released my arm. In the hall, we were met by the servant. In strange French, he explained that he was at our disposal and inquired if we required anything. Holmes dismissed him to rest, and the servant departed, leaving a bell. One ring, and he would appear instantly. Exceedingly convenient. We sat in armchairs beside a table dating from the era of Louis XVI. Our hosts are thoughtful. Holmes pointed to a bottle. The port so pleasing to your palate. Would you care for some? No. The intoxication was slowly ebbing. Temptation grew, but I restrained myself. Excellent. He returned the bottle to the table. Well, Watson, what is your impression? A complete enigma. A combination safe, yet the jewels vanished. Inconceivable. Yes. Holmes smiled sadly. Have you a hypothesis? I believe I know who took the jewels. Indeed. I believe Prince Peter knows as well. Then why? I believe the thief also knows that I know, and that Prince Peter knows. Hold, Holmes, hold. He knows that you know that he knows. No, that is altogether too convoluted. Why send for you at all if everyone knows everything? Dirty work, Watson. Dirty work. You are capable of washing the surgery floor after receiving patients, yet you employ a charwoman for the purpose, do you not? I did. I sighed. I did when I practiced, but still. The Oldenburg family can afford to invite experts from England. They are a wealthy family, Watson, very wealthy. Who is the thief, then? Tomorrow, Watson, all tomorrow. You recall, in the most delicate manner possible. And set your watch, or better give it to me. There, Watson. Now you are thoroughly in Russia. We retired to our bedrooms. The bed was made, smelling of freshness. A thick night candle burned faintly, but I had ample light from the window, from the moon. I looked outside. My room faced the park. Save for the moon, not a flicker of light was visible anywhere. And silence, complete, almost absolute silence. Serene, lulled by tranquil repose, I fell asleep with the thought that a lighter or more pleasant case I had not known in all the years of my acquaintance with Holmes. How mistaken a man can be. A knock at the door awakened me, a knock and an insistent call. Watson, Watson, wake up! Holmes, is that you? I glanced at my watch. Good heavens, even here it was 5:15. What time was it in London? Dress quickly, Watson. I'm waiting for you. If Holmes woke me so early, it was not without cause. I dispensed with shaving, contenting myself with a wash. I descended to the hall 10 minutes later, but Holmes had already gone. A note lay upon the table. Proceed to the left wing of the castle. Evidently, the matter admitted of no delay. Strange. I had fancied Holmes needed merely to lay his hand upon the thief's shoulder and say, "Return the jewels," and that certainly did not require such early rising. There was no dew, and my shoes remained dry as I walked through the tall grass. I found Holmes immediately, Holmes and several others, Prince Peter, Colonel Haushofer, and Constantine. Doctor, pray look, perhaps. The prince looked bewildered, distraught. Drawing nearer, I understood the cause of agitation. Behind the bushes in the grass lay Miss Liza, the elder prince's ward. The waxy pallor of her face was alarming, and when I attempted to feel her pulse, the cold body confirmed it. The girl was dead. Her arm was twisted at an impossible angle, and upon raising her torso, I realized beyond doubt her neck was broken. She is dead, I stated the obvious to those present. Holmes nodded. The gardener found her. Here are his tracks. The gardener informed the major domo. He informed Prince Peter, and then my turn came. What, in your opinion, is the cause of death, Watson? Well, a detailed examination of the body is required.
First impression, however? A fall from a height, possibly. I tilted my head back, as did all the others. Up there, 50 feet above, the open window of the tower was visible. Fell from there, suggested the colonel. Your Highness, I presume you should report the occurrence to the authorities. Holmes looked inquiringly at the prince. Yes, I shall telegraph the town. The castle has a link to the railway station, and from there...
May we move the body to a more suitable place?
I shall send a man to the hospital. It is quite close.
Very good. Watson, I must ask you to perform a thorough examination.
The hospital was indeed nearby. Within a quarter of an hour, a cart arrived at the castle. A pair of attendants carefully transferred the poor girl's body onto it, covering it with a special cloth. The local doctor arrived too. Regrettably, he spoke no English, and Constantine was so shattered that employing him as an interpreter, especially in so grim a matter, proved impossible. We were obliged to communicate in bad French and wretched Latin. There was no autopsy room at the hospital. The examination was conducted in the surgical theater. I shall omit details. A doctor's work contains many uninviting aspects. Having concluded the examination, we handed the body to the orderlies to dress in clothes brought from the castle. Patients were awaiting the doctor, about a dozen local peasants.
Wishing my colleague success, I headed back along the dusty road toward the castle. The heat had returned, accompanied by the smell of smoke. The forest was likely burning again. Geese, maddened by the sweltering heat, escorted me with serpentine hissing. A farm woman in picturesque rags set up a cry, "Tega, tega!" Whereupon the birds, losing interest in the stranger, rushed squawking at her call. Feeding time. I remembered I had eaten nothing since yesterday's dinner, nor did I feel any appetite. Holmes was in the cozy in the hall, having managed to smoke several pipes, judging by the density of the tobacco smoke. In the armchair opposite Holmes sat Constantine. "Make yourself comfortable, Watson. They will bring us sandwiches presently. Or would you prefer something more substantial?" No, I did not even want sandwiches. "Now then, Constantine, did you see Miss Liza after dinner?" "Yes, Mr. Holmes. Briefly. She was to assist Prince Alexander in preparations for some experiment." "At night?" "Yes, something connected with the lunar eclipse. Prince Alexander has wide interests, and for this eclipse he had prepared with special care. Liza said the prince was very anxious, and that she must go to the laboratory immediately." "The laboratory?" "Several rooms in the castle are set aside for it, in the tower and lower floors. Chemical and optical experiments, photography, I do not know precisely." "And Miss Liza assisted him?" "Occasionally. It was a sign of Prince Alexander's special favor." "Was anyone else to be present at this experiment?" "No, I believe not. Liza said nothing of the kind." "Thank you, Constantine. Your assistance is valuable to us." The student mumbled something and, bumping against furniture on his way out, departed. "Well, Watson, what say you?" "The girl's death resulted from a fall from a height. Fractured bones are evident. Internal organ ruptures are probable." "Probable? We performed no autopsy. That is not customary here on religious grounds. I deduce it from the fact that there were significant wounds on her chest and neck. She fell onto a bush and dry branches. Yet there was virtually no blood near the body, as you saw yourself. Consequently, the hemorrhaging was internal." "Thank you, Watson." "Holmes," I finally bit into a sandwich, "what does the elder prince say?" "They cannot find him." "The prince?" "Prince Alexander." "He has vanished?" "You have characterized the situation with precise accuracy." "Then why sit here? Watson, you and I are in Russia, a country with its own laws and customs. I cannot act without the knowledge of the authorities. The theft of jewels is a private matter. Death is not. An investigator from the provincial capital is expected momentarily." I looked at my watch. Word! 3 hours had elapsed since I woke. The servant, in his odd French, conveyed that we were requested at the castle. "Let us go, Watson. Holmes rose slightly more slowly, slightly heavier than before. The familiar path past the fountain, the echoing coolness of the castle hall, the parquet, massive doors, everything was registered with sharp clarity, stamped upon memory like a high-grade daguerreotype. In the study, Prince Peter and a stranger awaited us, a middle-aged man in a loose tussore suit, wearing a mustache and beard. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, this is Sviridov, Oleg Yurievich, official investigator." The prince added some complex, lengthy rank. "Delighted, most delighted." The investigator vigorously shook Holmes's hand. It seemed everyone in Russia spoke English. Extraordinary convenient. Or the Oldenburg family favored Anglophiles. "What business brings you to our parts, Mr. Holmes?" "I have been commissioned to recover a certain missing item." "Missing item?" The investigator was short and rather frail, but his voice, a deep, resonant bass, compelled one to take its owner with utmost seriousness. "Ah, these missing items. My advice, if you won't spurn it, look among the servants. 90 chances out of 100. 99. In novels, to be sure, servants are above suspicion, loyal and devoted to a man, but in real life it is often the reverse. In Russia, at any rate. I shall keep your advice in mind. Let us examine the scene of the occurrence, gentlemen." The investigator briskly led us outside. There was nothing for it but to follow. "So the body was discovered here? You have no doubt examined everything thoroughly, Mr. Holmes." "I have," and Holmes related the morning's events in detail, while I recounted the findings of the physical examination. "A fall from a height, yes. It happens. Who was the last to see Miss Liza?" "Presumably my father." Prince Peter looked the most exhausted among us, though he was immaculately shaved, combed, and dressed. "Prince Alexander? Then I must speak with him." He is not here." "Not here? Is he away on a trip?" "All horses are in the stable, and he did not appear at the station." "Is it his habit, thus, to walk off?" "No." "And you have no idea where he might be?" "None. I do not know." With every no, the prince aged several years. "Then perhaps you know what precisely your father and Miss Liza intended to do?" "Liza helped father in his experiments. One of them father intended to carry out tonight, photographing the lunar eclipse by some entirely novel method." "Where was this experiment conducted?" "In the laboratory. I shall show you." We returned to the castle by a side, non-principal entrance and climbed into the tower. "This is the upper laboratory," said the prince, opening the door. We entered. The investigator immediately made for the half-open window. "Aha!" He looked out and down. "I see. It was from this window that Miss Liza fell." He began examining the sill. The room resembled an optician's workshop. Mirrors, lenses, prisms were arranged neatly on tables. Curious. Holmes drew attention to a large 1-foot lens mounted on a massive tripod stand. "Careful, for heaven's sake, do not shift it. There is a delicate clockwork mechanism here." Prince Peter stepped toward Holmes. Holmes stood before the lens and peered into it. "A ray from the window, passing through the lens, strikes here." He pointed to a prism set in a wall niche. "By all appearances, the focused ray is refracted further down. See?" Indeed, beneath the prism in the niche began a small shaft about a foot square. "And what is this?" Directly beneath the prism, on another stand, a silver ring was fixed. It appeared a small lens, an eyepiece of sorts, was fitted into the ring. "Do you consider this optical system relevant to the event?" The investigator looked skeptically at Holmes, as if to say, "See what sort of wild goose chases some men get paid fees for?" "I am merely attempting to comprehend what occurred here during the night. What is your opinion?" The investigator stepped onto the low window sill, about half a yard off the floor.
I can reach the upper catch without difficulty, but Miss Liza would have had to stand on tiptoe. Why? Why should she stand on tiptoe? I felt nettled by Holmes being relegated to the background. To fasten the window. I imagine when Prince Alexander finished photographing the celestial bodies, he departed while Miss Liza tidied her notes or whatever she kept, wished to close the window, lost her balance, and tumbled out. Did anyone hear a scream? We must question the household. At this point, I remembered. At 3 a.m, I awoke. Something, I know not what, aroused me. You know how it is from sleep.
It is not impossible it was a scream or the sound of a fall. At 3:15, Watson, Holmes stepped beside me. Quite possibly. I glanced at my watch only fleetingly. And did you hear a scream, Mr. Holmes? No. Like Dr. Watson, I cannot say with certainty what woke me. I experienced a similar awakening myself, admitted the prince. I spent the night here, not at Olgino. I see. So the time is established. The investigator resembled a schoolboy who had successfully solved the first step of a complex problem at the blackboard. Your Highness, Holmes turned to the prince. You mentioned that this is the upper laboratory. It occurs to me we should inspect the lower one as well. For there is a lower laboratory, is there not? Yes, admitted the prince reluctantly. I suppose we are obliged to inspect it. My father strongly objects to outsiders entering it, but under the circumstances. He stepped to the wall. An architect's whim. The prince depressed a decorative projection, and part of the wall transformed into a low, narrow door. Pray enter, gentlemen. Careful, a spiral staircase. The steps spiraled steeply downward, the passage dimly illuminated from somewhere above. It grew darker and gloomier as we descended. How many, Watson? Asked Holmes, when we halted on a landing at the very bottom. 164 steps. Since long ago I had made a habit of counting steps. Quite correct. Consequently, we are below ground level in a subterranean vault. In the gathering darkness, a match flared with a hiss. Prince Peter took a 3-candle candelabrum from a bracket. Presently, gentlemen. The subterranean realm did not surprise me. If a man, a wealthy man, builds a medieval castle on the eve of the 20th century, it means he is a romantic, and the castle will inevitably contain a priest's hole, a dungeon, and secret passages. In short, everything dreamed of in boyhood. The heavy door opened without a sound. It was well built. The air was fresh and dry. We found ourselves in a hall. A high, vaulted ceiling, some 15 feet up, was supported by thick, rough columns. The lower laboratory, gentlemen. The prince lit several more candles set in wall sconces, and they reflected repeatedly. The greater part of the hall's walls were covered with huge mirrors, creating the illusion of infinite space. The hall was not particularly large, pentagonal in shape, another architect's whim, measuring no more than 20 feet across, and it was empty, save for a central elevation, a pedestal repeating the pentagonal shape of the room. The surface is silver. Holmes bent over the pedestal. I looked closely. It did indeed look like silver. In the center of the elevation was a small recess, about an inch across. It appears a small lens was fitted here as well, or something else. What significance can that have? The investigator, multiplied by dozens in the mirrors, could not conceal his irritation. Perhaps none. Dark waters in the clouds, muttered the investigator. Father is developing a method of multi-dimensional photography and desires no premature publicity. Tell me, is there another exit here, leading directly outside? A new idea seized the investigator. Yes. After a moment's hesitation, the prince replied. It is hardly ever used. Allow us to examine it nevertheless. By all means, agreed the prince with evident annoyance. The laboratory bore the stamp of an eccentric's whim, and exhibiting it to outsiders was hardly to His Highness's liking. Their Highness's liking. Beside one of the mirrors stood another door. The prince pushed it. Unlocked, Strange. Allow me. The investigator took the candelabrum from the prince's hand and, stooping, stepped into the dark opening. Mind your head. Holmes hurried after him. I pulled a candle from a sconce and passed through the door as well. Behind, bringing up the rear, came the prince's footsteps. The passage proved to be a low tunnel. One had to stoop, lined with limestone. Whimsical architect indeed. After 200 feet, the passage ended at another door, also massive, sturdy, and also unlocked. The door opened into an empty stone chamber. Holmes and the investigator were waiting for us. "Is this door usually left unlocked?" asked the investigator. "No, it is a storehouse. We have kept it empty for a long time." The investigator moved toward the exit of the storehouse. A third door, and again merely pulled to. He pushed it open, and sunlight extinguished our candles. "Look, Mr. Holmes, these are undoubtedly tracks." The investigator did not hide his triumph. I looked over Holmes's shoulder. Before us lay the river. The storehouse sat on a steep slope. A stone flight of steps led to the river, but between the steps and the door lay several feet of ground overgrown with weeds. Crushed stalks indicate that someone passed through here. On the stone steps, the tracks vanished, but by the river, on the sand. What distinct tracks! Straight out of a textbook. On the sand, 2 furrows were visible. Shallow, they ran parallel to one another. A body was clearly dragged here. The nature of the tracks makes it clear the direction was toward the river. "A bold assumption," Holmes remarked coldly. "It is obvious, Mr. Holmes. Someone dragged a body to this spot, then obtained a boat, brought it around, loaded the body into it, rowed downstream, likely, and sank it in some deep pool." "Whose body do you refer to?" Holmes asked with equal coldness. The investigator faltered. "Considering that the tracks lead from the laboratory and Prince Alexander has not been seen since last night, certain conclusions may be drawn. However, let us proceed to the landing." 100 yards upstream, several boats bobbed on the water. Some peasants were busy around one pulled onto dry land, caulking it, no doubt. We approached. The peasants paused in their work and bowed, touching their caps. The investigator asked something. One of them, a bearded old man, answered gravely. "He says a boat did indeed go missing. Frol Steglevatjeks. Never happened before, unless out of mischief. And the oars? The rowlocks?" Holmes evidently disliked the investigator's theory. "In the hut nearby there was a pole, unattended. Frol is a careless fellow. Never imagined anyone would covet his boat. A wretched boat, to tell the truth. If taken out of foolishness or mischief, it will turn up. Where can it go?" The investigator finished translating, spoke further with the peasant, then turned to us. "I have instructed them to go down the river. They may find the boat. As for the body, unlikely. Probably weighed down. We shall have to drag the river with boat hooks." And catching himself, added, "And your opinion, Mr. Holmes?" "I am full of admiration for your energy," my friend replied dryly. We returned to the storehouse. "Cherchez la femme," as the French say. We have the woman. Had she a sweetheart? She was on certain, though entirely innocent, terms with Konstantin Fadiev, my godson. Prince Peter was exhausted. We were all exhausted, save for the investigator, who blithely continued, "When was you last seen?" "This morning. This morning by the body." Then he went to his quarters. "Konstantin is taking this very hard." The prince, who was about 40, now looked older than his father. "I must see him. Gentlemen, will you escort him? I require a moment alone." "By all means," nodded Holmes. The prince remained at the entrance to the underground passage, while we preferred to take the overland route. The path led us to a broad granite staircase ascending directly to the castle. The water cascade refreshed the way, but I was pouring sweat, and the investigator constantly mopped himself with an enormous checkered handkerchief. Holmes alone climbed relentlessly higher and higher. "Konstantin lives in the suite apartments," Halfway up, we paused to catch our breath. I spoke with him shortly before your arrival. He asserts that he saw Miss Liza in the evening, briefly, for a few minutes only. That is all. Well, Mr. Holmes, men sometimes speak the truth and sometimes lie, said the investigator once he recovered his breath. Does he live alone? I mean, can anyone confirm that he did not leave his room during the night? Colonel Haushofer lives in the same building. The residence is quite large, designed for a dozen guests.
Out of politeness, the investigator did not urge us faster, but his impatience was obvious. He resembled a fox terrier at a foxhole, consumed by anticipation of the coming fight. We negotiated the remaining steps. I confess I neglected to count them this time, and rounding the castle, approached the suite apartments. At the entrance, the colonel overtook us. I have just been speaking with Her Imperial Highness Eugenia Maximilianovna, an exceptionally resolute woman. Allow me to introduce. I presented the investigator to the colonel. Is there no news of Prince Alexander? The investigator pounced on Haushofer immediately. None, and it is disturbing. Did you hear anything unusual during the night? No, I sleep soundly, or rather, in my sleep. No, I can say nothing for certain. And Konstantin Fadyev, did he spend the whole night in the house? Presumably. He returned about 20 minutes after I did. We drank a glass of wine in the sitting room and then retired.
Did you hear him go to sleep? Good heavens, how could I? Even had Constantine been typing on a typewriter, once he closed his door tightly, the clatter of the cursed machine vanished completely. It is an excellently built house, superb. Typing on a typewriter? Why, yes. He confessed he was trying his hand at literature, but his studies take up much time. He has papers to write. Wishes to get them out of the way quickly so as to devote himself entirely to writing. We chatted briefly before bed yesterday. Remarkable. The investigator's impatience drove him onward. Will you show us Mr. Fadyev's room? Up the carpeted staircase, not as fine as that in the cozy, we climbed to the second floor. Here, if you please. This is Constantine's room. The investigator knocked, louder, louder, and louder. No answer. The door is unlocked. Holmes pulled it toward himself. Go in. Call it premonition, call it deductive conclusion, but what I saw did not surprise me. It seemed everyone was prepared for it, save perhaps Colonel Haushofer. While I supported the body by the legs, the investigator righted the overturned chair, climbed onto it, and with a knife severed the rope from the chandelier hook. I loosened the noose and freed the neck. The body was warm, but it was now merely a body, not Constantine. Doctor, can anything be done? The investigator asked hopelessly. I shook my head. He has been dead at least half an hour. Shall we say between 20 minutes and half an hour? Déjà vu. All this had happened before, very recently. Suicide? The strangulation groove shows he was alive when the noose tightened. But, I hesitated. But Watson? Holmes's eyes gleamed. The old hound smelled a hot scent. I touched Constantine's head. There was definitely a contusion. He struck his head, or was struck, quite severely. The skull is not fractured, but it was enough to stun him. But not necessarily? The investigator was also practically trembling with excitement. It is impossible to say for certain. The blow was heavy, that is all. Aha! Aha! The investigator tugged furiously at his beard. Aha! He paced the room. Why, of course! This explains everything. The investigator appeared almost disappointed. The student's confession. Confession? Colonel Haushofer recovered from his shock. We approached the investigator. On the writing table stood two Remingtons side by side, one with standard script, the other apparently with Cyrillic characters. Next to the typewriters lay a stack of paper. The investigator drew a sheet from the machine. Mr. Holmes, so it is typed here. I have committed the irremediable. Learning of the affair between Prince Alexander and Liza, I killed them both. Now that anger has left me, I realize the madness of my act. To live with this is impossible. Farewell. What a horror.
The colonel, a military man, was shaken.
Everything pointed to this. The investigator addressed Holmes primarily. A young man, a student, returns after a long absence and discovers the girl is unfaithful. Whether true or not is immaterial. In a fit of rage, he kills her, throws her from the tower window, this during the prince's nightly experiments. Then the jealous lover descends to the lower laboratory, and the same fate befalls Prince Alexander. In the struggle, the murderer receives a blow to the head, but alas, it does not stop him. By a secret passage, he carries the body out and drowns it in the river, stealing a boat to confuse the investigation, after which he returns to his quarters. In the morning, the state of passion passes. He sees the girl he killed, fear and remorse overwhelm him, and the student hangs himself. Do you concur with this version, Mr. Holmes? It sounds convincing. Holmes agreed meekly. The investigator leafed through other papers. Literary works. Oh. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, he was writing about you. With these words, the investigator raised one of the sheets. Something rolled off it and fell onto the parquet with a clatter. Not bad. The investigator picked up the object. Such a giant diamond in the possession of a student. More likely. He checked himself, but could not contain it. More likely a gift from the prince to the girl. A token of favor, you know. I must ask Peter Alexandrovich if he recognizes this ring. Holmes and I exchanged glances. The missing jewels. I have a painful duty before me, informing the prince's family. Mr. Holmes, will you accompany me? The credit for so rapid and energetic an investigation belongs exclusively to you. Holmes bowed. I must decline. I shall go with you, offered the colonel. From the window we saw them walking toward the castle. Quick, Watson, quick! Insert a blank sheet into the machine. Why, Holmes? Faster! I obeyed. Type! He dictated a text, a few lines. Now give it here. He folded the paper into 4 and slipped it into his pocket. Let us return to the cozy. In utter bewilderment, I followed Holmes. Ask yourself, Watson, why was the letter typed on a Remington rather than written by hand, and moreover in English rather than Constantine's native tongue? Because it was addressed to you. Precisely, Watson, precisely. Addressed to me. You have seized the essential point. We dined in the cozy. The unfolding events had canceled the general meal. Holmes smoked incessantly, while I rested in a comfortable armchair with my feet upon a footstool. Drowsiness lazily visited me, hovering nearby, peering into my face. Through the open window drifted the sounds of a summer day, birds coming to drink at the fountain, servants talking softly, peacocks screaming in the distance. Thus passed more than an hour. The investigator dropped in to share news and show off a little. You see, Mr. Holmes, even in our backwoods we know a thing or two.
We can manage, but what a blow to the family. Colonel Haushofer is preparing to depart. The family needs quiet. He is leaving? When? Right now. He is already carrying his luggage to the carriage. Holmes produced the sheet of paper from his pocket. Here is what I found under my door. Constantine's message. The investigator unfolded the sheet and read aloud. Mr. Holmes, attempting to divert suspicion from myself and confuse the investigation, I hid the jewels among Colonel Haushofer's effects. Now that I have decided life is not worth living after what I have done, I would not wish to cast a shadow upon an honest man. Constantine. He read it through a second time, silently, then turned to Holmes. And you show this letter only now? I went up to my room literally 10 minutes ago, found the letter, decided to consider. We must hurry. The investigator harbored no grudge. These English. Again, we walked to the suite apartments, endless déjà vu. At the doorstep, the coachman fussed about the carriage. A servant appeared in the doorway. The investigator said something to him, and he halted, setting a suitcase on the porch. Were you looking for me? Called the colonel from above. For a moment. We went upstairs. New circumstances have come to light. The investigator handed the colonel the letter. Read this. The colonel, curbing the impatience of a man in a hurry, began to read, holding the sheet at arm's length. Farsightedness. Nonsense. There is nothing in my luggage. You see, Colonel, Holmes spoke gently, sympathetically. The stones are so small they are easily overlooked. But I packed everything personally and very carefully. Nevertheless, the poor fellow confessed he planted the jewels on you. Why should he lie before death? Preposterous. Entirely agree with you. The investigator looked around the room. 1 suitcase downstairs and 2 here. Is that all? All. We must search. Allow me the dressing case. Holmes lifted the dressing case from the table, opened it, and began laying out bottles and small boxes. One, square and silver, he favored over the rest. What is in this? Tooth powder. Careful, do not spill it, it stains. I shall try. Holmes raised the lid. Stains indeed. He plunged his fingers into the powder and a moment later extracted something resembling a hard candy. Here is one. He wiped the object with a handkerchief, revealing a red, transparent stone. A ruby. And here is the second. Splendid. The investigator even snapped his fingers. How did you guess the student hid the jewels here? Psychology of the criminal. Had I Dr. Watson's talent, I should write an entirely new textbook of criminology. On the deductive method? Not only. The motives of crime, the criminal's dread of exposure, or conversely, sense of invulnerability. You see, Colonel, we have not detained you long. Holmes returned the items to the dressing case. My thanks, bowed the colonel, a stiff, formal bow. I came near carrying off stolen property. I'm now your debtor. Since no report of stolen jewels was made, they will not figure in the case. That is the least that can be done for the family. Therefore, no written reports. The investigator then shouted something downstairs, and the servant returned for the suitcases. May I depart? Of course, Herr Oberst. A few minutes later, the carriage drove through the gates, bearing Colonel Haushofer and his luggage away, but without the rubies. Parting from the investigator, I must spend the evening over my report, scribbling. I detest it intensely. We headed for the castle. I shall inform His Highness. The footman left us in the hall, cool even on this stifling evening. His Highness awaits you in the study. Awaits was too strong a word. The prince barely stirred in his chair. Have you discovered anything? Holmes crossed the room and placed the stones on the desk. Are these they?
Where? Where were they?
I never imagined a pair of rubies could excite such emotion. In Colonel Haushofer's dressing case, in a silver box among tooth powder. The prince nodded, as though expecting to hear something of the sort. Yet the colonel intended to leave, and he has left. So be it. So be it. The prince carefully, tenderly placed the stones in a small, polished casket. His eyes sparkled. He bustled about, rubbed his hands, paced the study from corner to corner. At last he stopped before us. Mr. Holmes, you have brilliantly vindicated your reputation as the preeminent private detective. Here, in a foreign land, you recovered the missing items 24 hours after taking up the case, notwithstanding the events that so abruptly intruded upon our lives. Unquestionably, you deserve an additional fee. Do you prefer cash? Through my bank would be more convenient. As you wish. I shall telegraph my London agent. When do you depart? Does your Highness not wish us to look into today's events? Oh no. Such matters in Russia fall within the jurisdiction of state authorities. We are strict about such things. The law. Then tomorrow we shall leave the castle. I trust we shall see each other in the morning. Alas, circumstances have rendered me a less than hospitable host. There was nothing for it but to take our leave. Neither Holmes nor I spoke a word until we found ourselves in the hall of the Cozy. Moreover, Holmes managed to smoke a pipe, and I to partake of a cup of tea. The servant brought a hissing samovar and a tray of various delicacies, before the silence was broken. So, Watson, we have been dismissed.
One would think you dreamt of becoming a court detective and taking up permanent residence here. I confess to feeling slightly miffed by the prince's indifference. The mystery is solved, vice punished, virtue triumphant. What more could one ask? No, Watson, no. Merely the most superficial, obvious layer of the case has been exposed. Good heavens, to judge complex events solely on the strength of a boot print or a broken twig is a crime in itself. What twig? I speak metaphorically. And your famous method? Mud splashes on your cloak indicate you were reading Milton yesterday? Do not exaggerate, Watson. The method assists the brain, supplying it with facts that would otherwise go unnoticed, but it does not replace the subsequent labor of that self-same brain. Someone finds a button in the grass and fancies he works like Sherlock Holmes. And if there are two buttons, he surpasses Sherlock Holmes. To leap upon obvious, glaring clues without bothering to look into the essence of the phenomenon. There is nothing further from my method, Watson. But Holmes, that Russian investigator found the murderer and discovered the motive. The crime is solved on all counts. Holmes did not reply. Come now, my friend.
What occurred in no way diminishes your renown. The young pup snapped up the bone merely because it was closer to him and right in plain view. Remember the case of the Hound of the Baskervilles? Well, imagine that prior to your arrival at Baskerville Hall, the monster had been shot by some local hunter. Holmes finally laughed. Upon my word, there is something in that. Tell me, Watson, why did the case of the Baskerville Hound occur to you at all? Well, unconscious memories. The present case bears a certain resemblance to that one. A castle, an old nobleman, a young nobleman, night terrors, remoteness from town. You must admit the resemblance is considerable, like a mirror reflection. You are entirely right, Holmes said earnestly, almost solemnly. Time and again I am convinced of the acuity of your judgment. Are you sleepy? He asked abruptly. I have felt sleepy all day, since early morning, but as for going to bed, no. In London they are drinking 5 o'clock tea just now, and we shall have supper. I knew it was useless to question Holmes. He detested incompleteness, hasty, untidy work. A premature conclusion might crush new facts that could give the matter an entirely different turn. No, Holmes waited for the final fact, however trivial it might seem, and only then, having checked the chain of deductions 3 or 4 times, would he astonish us with a brilliant, dazzling finale. At present, he was biding his time, and he might require my assistance. I therefore ordered plenty of strong coffee from the servant and prepared to stay awake. It was not the first time Holmes and I had spent the night together, but I do not recall doing so in such comfortable surroundings. Yet I could not settle down. After skimming several French novels, I realized fiction did not hold my interest at all. Holmes sat down at a magnificent grand piano and began producing sounds so discordant that I could not endure them long. As you wish, Watson. In response to my protest, he began playing waltzes by Strauss the Younger. Beautiful music, beautifully executed upon a beautiful instrument. But from that evening onward, I conceived a dislike for the waltz, and am unlikely to change my mind to the end of my allotted earthly existence. Nor did Holmes appear to derive pleasure from it. Suddenly, in the middle of a phrase, he ceased playing. What time is it, Watson? The question betrayed his tension. The clock, a large grandfather clock, stood behind him. He had merely to turn around, but he preferred, subconsciously no doubt, to shift the responsibility for time onto me. 10:15. Early, Watson. How early? Fortunately for us, a chess table and pieces were found in the hall. I confess without undue modesty that at the club I am considered a strong player. I have thoroughly studied theory, know openings well, and to achieve a draw against me is an honor. Holmes, on the other hand, regarded chess as a tedious pastime and generally avoided playing. The store of nervous energy is limited, he maintained, and better expended upon more serious pursuits.
He sat at the board rarely, in cases of forced inactivity, opened his game with the king's knight, and thereafter conducted the struggle as though no manuals existed whatever. This, however, did not prevent him from winning a game against the London champion, brought to Holmes by his brother Mycroft. A wager was involved. But, to the tragedy of chess, a player's career held no attraction for my friend. Tonight, neither Holmes nor I invested passion in the game. By midnight, we had made barely a dozen moves, and a precarious balance remained upon the board, the balance of European powers in that hot summer. Midnight struck. The dismissed servant had long since departed. The samovar grew cold. The inevitable murmurs of rural life had fallen asleep, it seemed. The infrequent click of moved pieces formed a harmonious accompaniment to the advancing night. The coffee I had drunk forced my heart to beat faster than usual. Holmes repeatedly wiped beads of perspiration from his temples. The open windows offered poor relief from the stifling heat, and if night moths flew into the hall, it was merely to hurl themselves against the ceiling and, spreading their wings, feign to be leaves. The flame of our candles held no lure for them. While Holmes pondered a move, I must have dozed, for I heard the howling of the Baskerville monster, the heavy breathing of the mire, the weeping of Mrs. Stapleton, and my own words of comfort, pitiful and absurd. "Watson, wake up!" Holmes was shaking my shoulder. I looked at the clock, 5 minutes past 1, and probably blushed. I do not know how I fell asleep.
No matter, Watson. At least you rested.
Chancely, I raised my eyes. The room was draped in living fabric. Hundreds, thousands of moths covered the ceiling and the upper walls. Curious, is it not? I purposely left the window open. Not a trace of sleepiness remained upon Holmes's animated face. "And now, Watson, are you prepared to accompany me? Will you require me? Undoubtedly. Then I am ready." Holmes extinguished the candles. Carefully, striving to make no noise, we left the cozy. "To the castle, Watson," Holmes called to me in a low voice. Against the sky, whitish from the moon, the castle towered as a dark mass. Holmes led me to an inconspicuous small door. Servants' entrance, housemaids, plumbers, private detectives. Locked, but not bolted. Holmes worked for several minutes with picklocks. "Step inside. I brought a candle, but let us endeavor to do without." He led me through dark passages. Carpets rendered our progress silent, ghost-like. Careful. Steps. We were ascending. "Recognize it, Watson?" I stepped behind Holmes and looked around. Unquestionably, we were in Prince Alexander's laboratory, the upper laboratory. The window, that very one, was flung wide open. I looked out. The night remained bright, but near the horizon, wherever one looked, darkness was accumulating, dense, heavy, and this darkness was momentarily cleft by crimson flashes of lightning. "A thunderstorm is coming," I said to Holmes, and confirming my words, a low roll of thunder reached, or rather rolled, toward us. The window panes vibrated briefly as though a giant beast had exhaled a wave of heavy air. "Observe the optical system," whispered Holmes. Moonlight from the window was gathered by the lens into a beam and, refracted by the prism, fell upon a glowing stone in a silver clamp. "There it is, the ruby, the concentrator." The ray, thin and brilliant, passed from the stone into the wall niche and vanished down the shaft. "Let us go downstairs." The door to the lower laboratory stood open. The clockwork compensates for the moon's movement, but it is risky nonetheless. Holmes almost ran down the steep iron steps. I kept pace as best I could. The lower laboratory was illuminated, but so dimly I barely discerned my friend's silhouette. "Careful, gentlemen!" The young prince's sharp voice made me start. "Do not approach the mirrors." I finally made him out. The prince stood nearby, a mere 3 paces from the entrance. "I see, Mr. Holmes. You wish to dot the I's. Very well. Look." The ray from the upper laboratory pierced the air without scattering or diverging in the least. striking the second ruby in the center of the pentagonal pedestal, where it vanished. The mirrors glowed imperceptibly with the ashen light of the moon's dark side, while above the pedestal hovered a fog, phosphorescent, crimson, sparks from a bonfire built who knows where. Several minutes must have elapsed. The foggy luminescence began to grow, to intensify, as though wind were fanning that selfsame bonfire. Now it was a turbulent, shape-shifting cloud. For a moment it blazed with true brilliance. "Oh, Lord!" The prince recoiled, but the light began to fade, rapidly and uncontrollably. Once more, a roll of thunder reached us. By some strange architectural feature, we did not so much hear it as feel it, almost tangibly. And with that thunderclap, vanished the fiery thread connecting the rubies. "But the moon has not set." The prince addressed Holmes timidly, as an elder. "Presumably other necessary factors exist?" Holmes lit a candle. The hall resumed its familiar appearance. No fog, nothing. "Let us ascend," suggested Holmes. The prince swept his gaze across the hall, seeking something, but without conviction, without hope. "Let us ascend," repeated Holmes. The moonlight did indeed still fall upon the lens. The mechanism operated properly, but the light no longer animated the ruby, no longer generated the fiery thread. Beyond the tower, however, fire was abundant. Peasant dwellings were burning. Before our eyes, the blaze spread wider and wider, striving to encircle the castle in a ring of fire. Screams were heard, human screams, and even more terrifying animal ones. The alarm bell began to toll. "The castle is in no danger, but the factory is threatened," shouted the prince. Subsequent events of that night merged into confusion in my memory. Holmes and I could be of no assistance. 2 elderly men, 2 old fellows. The fire pumps kept the flames from the castle, but the refinery, the confectionery factory, and the peasant cottages burned to the ground, burned swiftly, fiercely. The thunderstorm proved dry. Rain never even thought of starting. The hospital burned as well. The prince designated the suite apartments as an emergency hospital, and I, together with the local doctor, bandaged terrible burn wounds of peasants who had received them saving their possessions. By noon, reinforcements arrived from the provincial town, and I, drunk with exhaustion and a sleepless night, returned to Holmes at the Cozy. On the way, I was deeply distressed by the sight of wretched livestock, scorched by fire. Their owners had driven them into the manor yard in hopes of veterinary aid, and in the animals' eyes, suffering was written even more plainly than in human ones. Only rarely did they utter a sound, then fell silent again, striving to preserve the remaining drops of ebbing life. With heavy hearts, we departed the castle. Smoke and ash drifted in the air, penetrating clothes, hair, seemingly our very flesh. In our Pullman compartment, I exhausted more than 1 bottle of toilet water until Holmes advised against it. "The smell, Watson, haunts you from within." From within? The train was speeding through France, and thousands of miles separated us from the castle where embers were perhaps still smoldering. "Yes, Watson, and all the eau de cologne in the world will not avail until you banish it from your mind." I looked at my friend in surprise. "Holmes, you seem familiar with psychoanalysis?" "My dear Watson, I've long ceased to be that self-absorbed, self-confident individual you met God knows how many years ago. I had time, ample time, after my struggle with Professor Moriarty. And in my forced exile, I did not waste it. Since then, tracking the achievements of the human intellect has become my duty. For the underworld, too, makes ever wider use of the fruits of science." A certain grandiloquence and solemnity in Holmes's tone signaled that the case was nearing its conclusion. The finale was at hand. "Now then, Watson, open your notebook. The problem presented by Prince Peter is of the kind usually considered delicate."
certain family jewels vanished and their recovery was required. Access to the safe. Observe, Watson, a safe with a combination lock was possessed, besides Prince Peter, by one person only, his father. That he was the thief in question was obvious. The son found it awkward to accuse his father of theft and was affluent enough to call in an expert, that is, myself. The son knew the thief was the father knew the son knew it, and my role was obvious to both. Return the stones without exposing the culprit. Such cases have occurred in our practice before, Watson. But why should the father steal the jewels? Not to present them to Miss Liza, I imagine. Certainly not. The stones, the rubies in particular, were required for a certain experiment Prince Alexander was conducting, and he did not wish others to conduct it. Recall the conversation at dinner. And the stones, not his property by the way, were requested by none other than the Empress. I had no choice but to await morning, when Prince Alexander, having concluded his experiment, would have returned the stones. The murderer thought otherwise. At night he penetrates the laboratory. Above, Miss Liza monitors the progress of the experiment. The clockwork mechanism needed supervising, and there were likely other duties. The murderer ruthlessly hurls the poor girl from the window and meddles with the optical system. He extracts the first ruby. Then he descends to the lower laboratory and finishes the work. Kills Prince Alexander? Watson, you observed with precise accuracy that this case is a mirror reflection of the Baskerville Hall affair. Remember? There the murder was masked by the intervention of supernatural forces, an infernal monster. Here, believe me, my friend, it was no easy matter for me to arrive at such a conclusion. Here the murders were committed in order to distract us from the manifestation of supernatural forces. Holmes. Watson, if the phrase supernatural world disquiets you, I shall devise a pseudo-scientific term, parallel world, for instance. The essence remains unchanged. We find corpses, Lizas, Constantines, and it is taken for granted that Prince Alexander is also dead, murdered. Everything unfolded so rapidly that it occurred to no one to ascertain what the prince father was actually engaged in that night. Photographing the eclipse? Perhaps he began with that. You know, Watson, when I traveled in Tibet, the inhabitants there refused to be photographed. In their view, a portion of the soul was lost thereby. But, before the corpses grow cold, we learn the solution. I refer to Constantine's confession letter. You see, Holmes? Fortunately, Watson, I do not regard a suspect's confession as the queen of evidence. And was there a confession? You made an remarkably accurate deduction. The letter was written, typed, in English because it was addressed to me. Or, as I suggested in expanding your thought, it was addressed to me because it was typed in English. The person who wrote it did not command Russian, at any rate, not as a native tongue. But Constantine was murdered by someone known to him, someone he did not fear. The murderer first stunned him, then hanged him. To what end? To close the case quickly by providing us with a culprit, a confession, and a motive. He is clever, the murderer. Who is he then? A man known to Lisa and Constantine, desiring to possess the stones, and not of Russian nationality. Excluding you and me, Watson, pray allow us to be excluded from the list of suspects. There remains one man. Colonel Haushofer. Precisely. Here you and I, Watson, employ his own trick, Constantine's pretended confession, only this time regarding the stones. If we accept the first confession as genuine, then the second is genuine too, and we find the rubies in the colonel's luggage. Why did you let him go? Why not arrest him, bring him to trial? Watson, I am merely a private detective, a foreign expert. My chain of proof would not convince a jury nor investigative organs. What is more, it barely convinces me. Why? The experiment, Watson. Prince Alexander's experiment. It is the master link in the deductive chain. We can never set the experiment aside. The prince spoke of keys to the door. The keys are the rubies. The door is a complex optical system, But where does that door lead? To the proverbial parallel world, I believe. And when Prince Alexander opened that door and stepped across the threshold, Colonel Haushofer slammed it shut and drew the key from the keyhole. But we saw tracks by the river, a body dragged. Splendid tracks, straight out of a textbook. Remember the Russian investigator's remark? Colonel Haushofer crafted them skillfully, if too pedantically. He stole the boat as well to account for the absence of a body. And in reality, Prince Alexander remained over there. And you know it as well as I do, though you refuse or are unable to admit it. I offered no answer. Remember, the following night the son repeated the father's experiment. The night before had been a full moon, Watson, a true lunar eclipse. Moon, earth, and sun aligned in a straight line, and gravitational forces likely played a role alongside light. On the subsequent night, the planetary alignment had shifted, and the experiment succeeded only partially. You saw, Watson. What did you see? I still consider it an illusion, a nightmare vision of a weary brain. Speak, Watson. Well, in that swirling crimson fog, I seemed to see Prince Alexander, and I know not. He appeared entwined by vines or giant caterpillars, tentacles. I saw the self-same thing, Watson, and I am certain Prince Peter did as well.
You know my method. When all other explanations are excluded, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Prince Alexander found a door to a parallel world, passed through it, and remained there. A far from cozy place, it seems. But at present, something else troubles me. Something else? Holmes was voicing what I had feared to confess to myself. I fear that something from that world penetrated into ours. God grant that the fire which consumed the village was the work of ordinary lightning, and God grant that beyond the village nothing else catches fire. You think? I know not, Watson. I know not. I turned the pages of my notebook. And the diamond? Why did the prince need to steal the diamond ring? One can only conjecture. Perhaps the diamond had its own role in the optical system, or the prince did so to give the theft the appearance of vulgar burglary. Or did he truly need money, personal money? There is ample room for speculation. Upon returning to London, Holmes retired from detective practice. A modest inheritance following the death of poor Mycroft enabled my friend to purchase a small farm in a secluded corner of Sussex, where he lives in considerable solitude. Occasionally, however, he ventures to London to meet men of science, ethnographers, physicists, archaeologists. Several times he attended séances of the most famous mediums. The war prevented him from organizing an expedition to Egypt, but patience Holmes possesses in abundance. Avoiding publicity, he persuaded a well-known lord to head the expedition. I have stepped away from detective themes. I write novels, adventure, social, fantasy, and await the moment when Holmes calls me to conclude the affair that began in the summer of '13, the summer of dry thunderstorms. My traveling bag is always packed.